So in this final video we're going to look at how we can set up the footer section down here, and then we'll move on to looking at how we can test and make sure that our code is up to scratch. So we've got, as you can see, a number of different columns, and that's going to be the same kind of idea as we've done up above, except instead of having just 2 columns we're going to have multiple columns. And the way I've decided to do it is to break this up into 7 columns and only put content into some of them, so we have those nice thin columns. We're also going to have to change the styling on our headers and our paragraphs to create this effect. We're only going to look at these 3 columns here, but the same principles would apply to this 4th column, and if you're going to do the sections down the bottom. So back in our HTML, we need to look down to, hopefully you already have this footer section in your HTML right at the bottom of your code, and that's where of course we're going to put all of the information that we're going to have in our footer. So I'm going to start by making some divs, and I'm going to give these a class name of column footer. And I'm going to need to have 7 of these, so I'll just copy and paste that code just to make it a little bit quicker. And then go back up to the top one. And this one, there's not going to be anything in it because it's just going to be an empty column on the left hand side. So I'll put another comment in here just to let everyone know if they're looking at the code what's going on. Okay, so the next one, that's where we're going to have information about other links if you want more information. So we're going to start with an H2 heading. And then underneath that we're going to have an unordered list. And I'll just go through and pause the video while I put in this content. So that's the content I want to put into my list, straight from the ASUS website. And if I look at my live preview, you can see that it has come up here, but of course without the formatting it looks a bit strange. So I'll flick over to the CSS sheet, and now we're going to put in some rules to format that a little bit better. So as we've got into the habit of doing, we're going to use the class name, and the first thing that I need to do is define the width of that column. Now because we've got 7 columns, I've worked out already that we need to have that as a width of 14%, and it should work out across the whole page. I'm going to set the background color to a grey color, and I'll customize that again with Control E, and I'll slide this up so it's a little bit lighter. And let's see how that's looking. So you can see here we have an issue with this background color going all the way up here. That's an issue to do with the floating that we have of the elements above it. We need to of course put in a clear property for the footer. So I'll go to my CSS again, and instead of putting it in the column foot divs, I'm going to put it on the footer overall, and we're going to clear both. So what this means is when we refresh our page, we can see that the grey is only going to below these 2 elements now, because these were floated left. If you don't clear those floated elements, the element below will float up above it, or will flow up above it. So we need to put the clear properties in to make that happen. Okay, let's go back to our column, and I'm going to put float left in there as well. I'm going to give it a height of 300 pixels, and I'm going to put some padding at the top of around 30 pixels. Okay, so now back in our live preview, you can see it's looking a lot better down here. You can see from these blue lines, you can see that we've got our columns in place. They don't quite fill up the whole screen. That's not too much of an issue because the bit on the right is empty anyway, and I'm going to put in the same background color on the footer, so that bit will be filled in with the same color as these ones here. So if I flick back and do that now, I'll just copy this line background color and put it into the footer, and you can see that that still hasn't filled in this gap here. The reason for that is we need to actually change the size of the footer, so we're going to put in a width of 100%, and we need to put in a height of 300 pixels, so it matches these other divs that we made, and you can see now that has filled in that section. Okay, so I think that's about it for this first bit here. Let's go back to the HTML and put in the rest of the div content. So directly below this previous section that we did here, we're going to find the next starting div tag, which is this one, and then put in the same kind of information. So I think again I'll just copy this section of code, paste it in here, and I'll go through and change. First of all I'll just indent that, and then I'll go through and change the content that's in there. Right, so I've gone through and added in the rest of the content. I haven't gone through that step by step because hopefully you can see how that all works. It's very much the same as the previous one. And then at the bottom I've just copied in this comment for these empty columns. The last three are going to be empty. And then if we go back to our live preview, you can see how that's all lined up. So that's looking okay, but obviously we need to change this font because compared to the original website, which is a lot smaller, we need to adjust this a little bit. They've also got rid of the bullet points, so we need to change the text decoration of those lists as well. So of course to do that we're going to go back into our CSS and let's work on some rules for those fonts. So we're going to use column foot and then refer to the H2 elements within that, which of course are these bits at the top. You can see it outlined. And let's change the color, and this is a grey color that I used earlier, so I'll use the same one. And I want to create a little bit of space between the bottom of this heading and the start of our list, so I'll put a margin bottom of 15 pixels on there, and you can see that's pushed that down. So that's all I'm going to do for the H2. The next thing we're going to have a look at is the list items themselves. So I'm going to put list style to none to get rid of those bullet points. Change the color to the same color that we have up above. And I'm going to change the font size so they're a little bit smaller, and I'm going to change it to 50%, so it makes them nice and small. Okay, so that's looking pretty good now. One other thing that we might notice if we look back to the real website, the ASUS website, is this Monday to Friday is slightly different to the rest of it. So one way we can do that is we can actually put in span tags in the HTML, and I'll go back to the HTML and well, let's put those in. So we have this line of code here that we want to be slightly different to the rest of the list items. So I can put this span element in, and I'll put the closing span tag at the end, and this will allow us to create a different rule. If we go to column foot again and span, we can change the color. I'll start with just that same color that we had before, but click in, Control E, and I'll make it a little bit darker. So I'll drag it down like that. This also affects the font size, so we need to redefine this font size as 100%, 100% there, and you see it will now be the same size as the rest of them. Just looking at that, it's not a very distinct difference in those colors, so I'll just make this a little bit darker again so that it stands out a little bit more. Right, so that's it for our website. We've got all of the key components in place, and it looks quite similar but not quite identical to the original ASUS website. So what we need to do now is make sure that we can test and validate our HTML and CSS, and we'll have a quick look at that in another video.